we could get rid of money, if we could have some sort of exchange rate between chickens and ducks and pigs, maybe we could do things without money, and if only we had a great ratio between these things. This may sound ludicrous, but they're all about ratios in social planning. So, that's one of them. I'm just going through a few philosophers and what they want. And see what they have to say about that. Smith and Plato pretty much agree with each other that coinage was invented to facilitate exchange and to lower transaction costs. And Plato almost doesn't even see this an issue. He just says, so they needed to trade on Agora, so they invented coinage. He just says it in one sentence. Smith has a much longer section saying that if you were trading hard metals or seashells, there are problems with that. There's no government backing, and you need some sort of measure to say this is good stuff. Aristotle's main point is that you can compare commodities like a doctor and a shoemaker, and you can equate their labor much more easily. You may not have heard of Nicolas. He's a French thinker from the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance, who also looked at Greek coinage. And his main thing is he's seeing princes. Manipulate coinage during the Middle Ages for their own perspectives, just like Dionysius did. And he said, this is dangerous. We should somehow have an independent mint that is separate from the prince. And that's sort of getting at the division between fiscal and monetary policy that we have today. I mean, the Treasury and the Fed are different institutions that are supposed to act independently and counterbalance each other. They don't, but that's the idea. Let's just look at Sparta first. Sparta is, again, supposedly the great exception to the rule of coinage. That Sparta had no money. Lycurgus he said that Lycurgus, according to the story in Plutarch, came up with a system that he was going to have iron money. And it's this giant big knot, like this big. And that's going to be worth a penny. And so if you want to buy anything, you have to get an ox cart and just pile these things on. And he says that this made commerce utterly impossible. That philosophers left, rhetoricians left, prostitutes left, because you can't pay a prostitute with 3 ox carts full of these iron things. But he also says that this removes corruption. How do you bribe an official with 6 ox carts full of iron? You can't slip it on the table. So it removes corruption, and it really, for all intents and purposes, gets rid of retail trade. Now, such iron. He also doused the iron in vinegar when it was being made, so it doesn't even have a use value. It's just hunks of metal you can't do anything. You can't even make a sword out of it.
Why would he want to do that?
Well, he wants to do that to get rid of currency, to get rid of everything the money economy brings with it. And that to promote quality or militant equality in these mess houses and stuff like that. Now again, whether or not this actually happened is debatable. We have not found these iron coins. We have not found Spartan coins until Lysander. Now Lysander is, if you have read your Peloponnesian War, the great Spartan commander who rises to power towards the end of the war. He defeats the Athenians at Aegis Pomonti and really brings about the end of the war. He thinks differently. He's sort of a new Spartan, and he says, "Look, guys, we need currency." Now, whether or not he's using this as a political ploy to come to power or not, that's what the other guys think. But Sparta has much more influence in the area, and they need to pay their troops. They need to pay their mercenaries. So he said, "Let's come up with a currency." And it's at this point where the Spartan equality system really breaks apart, and arguably they collapse. So this would be a great analogy for Sparta, the impact of currency on a society, except for the fact that we don't know whether or not Lysander was the first person to. So, final thoughts. We've seen that coinage from its very inception has been about facilitating retail exchange and about profit of the state. You can't have a private currency because if you have a small group of people, that will work fine. But as soon as you go to the next town over, they've never heard of your local family who stamped that coin. They've heard of Athens, though. And the fact that people have been worried about what happens when we go off the gold standard, what happens when we muck around with currency, we play with these things. Well, fiat money has arguably always been with us since finance first invented. That's that. Questions, comments, anything? on the Bessel's course on ancient Greece. Yes.
I liked your battle of silver versus gold thing. Is that like an actual thing scholars talk about, or is this your idea?
No. This is something that's the actual battle of Chaeronea is a battle between gold and silver. Of course, that's it. But it is no coincidence that Philip of Macedon was able to unify Macedon, take over Thrace because of money. He paid his troops a lot. He hired mercenaries, and there's no way you can do that without the massive gold supplies he's just cranking out. So Athenian foreign policy was dictated by controlling Thasos, by controlling those silver mines. Other cities' foreign policies, when they were fighting Athens, was to control the silver mines. Everyone says, "Oh, the invasion of the Battle of Marathon." Well, why the heck did they end Marathon? It's a nice bay. No, it's not a nice bay. That's where Hippias is from. And why is Hippias from there? Because that's where the silver mines are. Hippias' plan to take back Athens with Persian support is to land at Marathon, take over the silver supply, and then march on Athens. When the Spartans fortified Deiclea during the Peloponnesian War, there's a reason why they fortified it. Yes, it's to cut off the Athenian land trade. What the hell does that mean? Cut off the coins coming in. There's a reason why when they fortified Deiclea, Athens says, "Oh wait, we're out of money. Let's start making copper coins," which is not an edge topic. So there really is, I would say, a relationship between the big boys who can come up with their own coins and being able to muster all this economic power and those who can't. Now, yes, you could say, yes, Thebes was there too. Thebes came up in power, but arguably it's a flash in the pan.
Was there a particular reason gold would be considered more valuable than silver? Like, I'm assuming it was just from the electrum ratio
Yes.
thing.
I think we estimated trading in a ratio of 10 to 1 to 12 to 1 to silver. The reason would just be rare, because as I said, there was this massive amount of silver right underneath Athens. There's silver in Thasos, but there's no gold anywhere. There's a little bit of electrum. They didn't have the technology to split the electrum into gold and silver till Croesus comes in the Persian invasion. It's at that time period where they are able to split gold and silver in a way that they don't lose too much. And electrum coins last very long. Late into the classical period, you have the Cyzan seed, which is from Zeus. And as my professor said, it is marked with a tiny fish on it. Or he said tin fish. And so even a bimetallic coinage system does work, it just has an inherent uncertainty.
So you said that the splitting of the coins and counterfeiting the coins was kind of the way that instantly. Was that coin just of the city state that it happened to be in, or would it say if you were in Thebes counterfeiting Athenian coin?
That's actually a very interesting question, and that's something that I left out of here, but I guess I can go into. It's for that particular state. But there's a very interesting text in Athens we have regarding counterfeiting. And it says let us put a tester in the Piraeus so that he can test coins, and if you have a suspect coin, you take it to the tester. And then he says, if he determines that the coin is tablets cut, he then does this. Which is really unfortunate because the way it's broken, we can't tell the case ending of something. I don't want to get into specifics, but the point is, there are lots of other city-states, and even parts all over the Mediterranean that made Athenian coins. We see there's the Persians made Athenian coins. These aren't even good counterfeits because on Athena's chin, there's little Darius with a beard. The towns in Gaza made really, really terrible Athenian coins that you can obviously tell are fakes. And so the question is, if someone would bring one of these non-Athenian coins to Athens and try to use it, what would happen? And there are two interpretations of this tablet. One says they get thrown out. The other one is that it says if it is of sufficient quality to the tester, let him give it back, which means it's valid. So there's a theory that Athens actually allowed other Athenian coins to be used. Even when they weren't getting the profit from making them, they would still get the facility of having a larger money supply, more money circulating equals more tax revenue, more trade and income. So that's actually a very interesting question of how counterfeits for other city-states were made on the other side of that.
How does Athens